Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Growth Agenda, where we discuss tips, tactics, and strategies on B2B growth from some of the best commercial leaders out there and best minds out there to answer one question: where will growth come from? My name is Bart. I will be your host for this episode, and today we're going to be talking about the better approach to building go-to-market strategies and what it takes to build and manage a team to effectively bring those strategies to motion. Our guest on this episode is Anders Buchman, the VP Commercial at Upry, a temperature compliance solution for the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, where he is responsible for revenue, go-to-market, sales, and marketing. Previously, Anders held roles at Turis as a Chief Revenue Officer, at Onomondo as a Chief Commercial Officer, where he played a key role in scaling the business from 10 to 90 employees in 3 years, while raising a 21 million USD Series A, and a 4-year tenure at Bang & Olufsen, where he oversaw product launches and global events. That's just to name a few. He's also a lecturer at Copenhagen Business School and advisor to startups. And I couldn't be more excited to have him on the show and the conversation that's about to follow. Welcome, Anders.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Bob. What an intro.
Of course. I mean, what a guest. I think we should start off, Anders, by diving a little bit into go-to-market structures and just framing of what go-to-market is and why perhaps some of the traditional structures fall short. But maybe before we go into that, let's just define what go-to-market is for those listeners out there that don't know, and so that we're also on the same page. Let's define the basics. What is go-to-market, and why is it so important to B2B companies?
Yeah. Okay, so let's do it super basic. What is go-to-market? And I learned actually lecturing at CBS, like you said, that probably the nerdy level we'll get into during this session. That's a little bit too deep, but let's rewind completely. Go-to-market is just about how you sell.
Right. Okay. How you sell sounds pretty basic.
Sounds pretty basic, right? It's how we put our product in front of the customers in a way where it's helpful for them and they would like to buy.
Okay.
Zooming a little bit out on that,
yes.
It's basically how we orchestrate ourselves as a business around an ideal customer journey.
Okay.
That is our go-to-market, and it's where everything intertwines between what market do we choose,
yes,
what positioning do we choose,
yes,
what USPs do we have we want to play on,
yes,
and then how do we bring sales, marketing, partners, product, all of these things into motion in the most advantageous way, really.
Okay, so it's how we sell. Why is something so simple so difficult for so many companies? I mean, you see companies out there failing on their go-to-market strategies all the time. Why?
I think there's a multitude of things that's really present here. I think one is the level of complexity actually that a revenue leader, a go-to-market leader will need to operate at the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's all the macros playing in on geopolitics and all of these things we can surely imagine. That's very vivid in our memory.
Yes.
Then there's the ever-changing landscape around our customers.
Yes.
And the pace going up about that. I'm sure we would have said that for the last 50, 100 years, the pace is going up, but
right.
That's just the reality we're working into, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the notion of how do we build organizations that can actually not only follow, but preferably be ahead of the pace of these changes, right? And make that a place where humans not only want to be, but actually thrive in, right?
Right. Right.
So that's the multitude of things we need to thread together into what's called captured as go-to-market today, right?
Right. Gotcha. And so do you think that it's getting more and more difficult to build a go-to-market strategy in 2025? Is that what you're saying, with the multitude of factors changing? Or is it just getting it right?
I think there's a lot of people making a lot of money in spinning up complexity around it.
Right.
And I think there's certainly more options than we probably ever had in terms of how to go to market, in terms of both channels and how those evolve, but also what tools we use, what labels, i.e. titles, do we put on people, how do we structure our organizations, and the playing field in terms of what knowledge we can pull in have never been bigger, right?
Yes.
We have so much knowledge right out there. Obviously, we have the books we always had, right?
Right.
We have the YouTube you and I are on right now, with a lot of smart people sharing the best of what they know.
Yeah.
Then we have thought leadership coming into a whole new degree than what we've seen earlier, with people being incredibly transparent on how they build businesses. And we can keep obviously. Let's obviously mention AI, what we have at the tip of our fingertips in terms of knowledge, where we can get super tailored advice on what should I be doing in a given situation.
Right.
Really, I think that's the level of information we have at our hands.
Yes.
That we then need to be really good at selecting it.
Yeah.
And then I think staying true to.
Yes.
Or at least being consistent, and let me say it like that.
Yes.
So that when we choose something, we dig in and we execute, right?
Right.
And then that's strategy, right? That's knowing, okay, what's the playing field we choose? What's the focus we choose to apply?
Yeah.
And then like how long time do we stick in that lane, right?
Right.
What's our leading indicators that we are right or wrong?
Right.
And then we can absorb all of this amazing information on the side. But probably we shouldn't change our steer or the lane we've chosen every single day as we get new amazing input, right? We need to figure out what's the right cadence in there. And I think probably it's the amount of information we have at hand that's really the challenge, and then staying true to the focus we've chosen to apply from a strategy perspective.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of complexity to work with here. It's like, you've got all of these, like the information, you've got cadence, you have all of these different decisions to make. I understand that this is also something that you teach people at Copenhagen Business School, students. How do you explain all of this to them? How do you explain them the complexity? Is simplification a key factor here?
I think it's interesting that what young people can absorb in terms of complexity before generally then having been a number of years in a professional work environment, full time. Right. These are super bright people, but it underlines for me the level of complexity we have actually accepting when we run and operate a business.
Yes.
Because when I take what we do every day in Upry or some of my previous mentors for that matter, directly into the classroom, that doesn't translate very well. I really need to boil it down, and I even want to say dumb it down, and that's on me because you need to cater your communication to the receiving and not me as a sender, right?
Yes.
And we need to start quite basic on how do we want to take whatever service or product you have and bring it relevantly in front of your customer in a way that will persuade them to buy and will give them the impact they're looking for, right?
Right.
That's really what it's all about.
Yeah. And like dumbing it down is not even like, of course you do it for people that never have worked in a go-to-market team before.
Yeah.
But like from my point of view, I remember coming to my first job, for example, and I hear all these people throwing around these like abbreviations and everything. So I imagine that when you develop like a framework, which we're definitely going to get into, it's not only to like do it for students, but also for people in your organization to understand it better, to just like make sure it's easier to talk about.
Yes. So the framework you're hinting at, the commercial ecosystem.
Let's get to that.
Yeah. It's a really interesting story, like how I got to that. And I think it's just recognizing I'm not the smartest person in the room. So I needed some simple way to understand what are all of the abbreviations, what are all of the opportunities, what's all the knowledge at hand people are supplying me in whatever platform like we just talked about. Is it books? Is it YouTube? Is it podcasts? Is it keynotes live? Whatever it might be, network talks, these things, right? So when I started at Onomondo in 2020, that was the first time I was about to scale a company like that.
Yes.
Like you said, I'd been in Bang & Olufsen for 4 years doing go-to-market internationally, traveling like 100 days a year, meeting customers all over the world and basically just selling, right? Yes. Stitching together product sales and marketing. I'd been 10 years in the advertisement industry, had an agency myself also before that was acquired. But it was not, those two things didn't really lend itself very well to taking a company where I came in as number 12 to now having to scale through a pre-seed seed and then the Series A of 21 million euros, like you mentioned, right?
Right.
So we basically went out there and soaked up all of the knowledge we could gain in, I think, about a quarter to figure out what's the best guess we have at how to scale the business.
Right.
And that was the predictable revenue book. That was Medic as a qualification framework.
Right.
It was Jaco van der Kooi on YouTube before he started going nuts on music all the time, but also had all of his models going. And bless that guy, he's amazing. And then we try to stitch all of that together.
Yeah.
And what emerged over the course of like a year with then setting up a team that followed the SaaS methodology model, basically with a couple of people in marketing, 3 BDRs, 3 As, 3 CS.
Yes.
So like the classic SaaS funnel, that was how I built my commercial team.
Okay.
From the get-go, from like Jan 1st, 2021.
Okay.
And that's how we scaled.
I have a question over here. So you came in from Bang & Olufsen, obviously a huge company, right? You came in as employee number 12 at Onomondo. And how did you know which exact pieces to put together to build the sales team?
Well, that was kind of, I didn't, right?
Okay, you did it. Yeah.
That was the whole notion. So it's like, talk to really smart people that have done it before, read all of the relevant books and the recommendations I get, pick up all of the knowledge I can, and then create a hypothesis.
Gotcha.
So coming back to what we talked about with like strategy is choosing a focus, right? You have all of these things laid out in front of you, but your choice as a leader is to look at that and apply a certain focus and saying, this is what we're doing.
Right.
So I basically try to boil down those things and saying, okay, I believe that this structure for a team, sales, BDs, AEs, and CS, that's the way I want to go.
Yes.
And we're going to be outbound led.
Okay.
So that's going to be people on the phones every day, just hammering away, and us being really good at directing them from a RevOps revenue operations point of view, right?
Right.
That was the assumption, and that is again, I think, strategy. You got to make some assumptions, and then figure out when do you hold through, or when do you start changing course.
Gotcha.
And what emerged from that was that this orchestration of pulling together all of the relevant knowledge, or what I deemed relevant.
Yes.
I saw myself suddenly starting to coin commercial ecosystem. Like, this is where I, as a revenue leader, I'm like a conductor. Okay. I conduct how I play in my people-led motions against my platform-led motions. So that would be outbound and inbound.
Yes.
Toward partner-led motions and then product-led motions.
Right.
From very high complexity and high cost down to, I guess there's still some level of complexity, but higher velocity and lower cost, right?
Right. So that's basically that's where the commercial ecosystem model was kind of born. So again, it wasn't something that was born out of like a university setting. You actually you built this at Onomondo, a super fast growing startup, right?
Yeah.
And you basically, you created this blueprint of, if I understand correctly, you created this blueprint of everything that goes into a go-to-market strategy. And now you've just explained, a couple of these different components.
Yeah.
But like, if we were to talk about explaining basically what a ecosystem, what a commercial ecosystem does is like, it's a blueprint on how to build a go-to-market strategy, right?
Sure.
So if I'm a RevOps manager, or let's say that I'm a founder, how do I think about all of these individual components that go into building a go-to-market strategy? What do I need to think about? Where do I start even?
You need to understand what are the major components of how to structure your go-to-market.
Right. Yeah? Yes.
And there's basically two things going on. First, you have the bow tie funnel.
Yeah.
So the classic funnel went down and ended at close one. The bow tie will open up again.
Right.
Towards onboarding activation, your impact stage, what customers really buy. They don't buy the signature on your contract, they buy the impact.
Yes.
And if you do well on that and continue to do well on impact, you get to expand.
Yes.
That gives you the bow tie funnel, right?
Yes.
Then we have an overlay of resources. How do we push a customer through on their customer journey?
Right.
And those are the 4 resources I just mentioned.
Yes.
We have people, so the most expensive one. Mm-hmm. So that's usually outbound or CS later.
Yes.
That would be platform. So anything marketing from like inbound to customer marketing to whatever motion we can figure out in there. That would be partners. That could be partners that actually close customers for you, or that just provide leads, depending on, again, how you play your commercial ecosystem.
Right.
And lastly, the 4th resource is your product.
Yes.
And that's where PLG, so product-led growth, comes in. And again, I'm not the smartest person in the room, so this was taking all of these small abbreviations and saying, I need to be able to visualize this to understand where do they live in conjunction to each other, and which ones are relevant for us at that time in Onomondo, and which ones are not.
Yes. Basically, so it seems like it all revolves around a funnel, right?
Yeah.
Which starts off with sort of brand awareness, then sort of demand generation, then lead generation, and then you have the resources pushing it through.
Yeah.
And then you have some sort of what did you mention? Resources are the ones pushing it through. Then you have
you have the resources pushing through, and that's like an overlay on your bow tie, right?
Exactly.
And I think, by the way, will you put this in the meeting notes? There's a PDF explaining all of this, right?
Definitely are. We're going to link this model to the link episode where you can all look at this and see exactly what the commercial ecosystem looks like.
Beautiful.
Just so that, maybe Marius, we're also going to put it up and overlay it just so everyone can see it. Yeah. If we were to sort of then just, so let's say that I'm a commercial leader. Where do I start when I'm building a go-to-market strategy? What is the first thing that I think about?
So let's just say, so if we take the commercial ecosystem, that came in from that was how we ended up working in Onomondo.
Yeah.
And then when I stopped at Onomondo, I was like, let me just try and kind of white label this and saying, if I were to make a generic version that would work for all, what would that look like?
Right.
That's the version that you can download here today for free, have fun, make it yours. Right. And then I went out and offered that on LinkedIn, like, hey, does anybody want a free consultancy session on this? Just meet with open arms and transparency. I'll give you all the value I can in 90 minutes. Yeah. And then I had 62 meetings in 2.5 months, right? And ended up 45 of those were B2B SaaS startups from 50 to 100K ARR to 10, 15 million, right? Okay. So I consulted 45 of them in 2.5 months. Okay. And figure out that, okay, this is a great framework to talk from. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, where do you get started? You get started by getting an overview. Because the fact of the matter is most are lost and don't have that overview. Okay. So these are smart people I met, and I guess that would be the same for you in your consultancy business. But what goes on is everybody's just confused and lack a common language and something to have consensus on. And that's really all it is. Just start looking at that and saying, how are you selling today? Right. Or what's your best assumption on how you should be selling? Yes. And what motions do you need to make fly for that to happen? Right. That's really all it is, right? Okay. Yeah.
Sounds pretty simple.
I hope it is.
So obviously you need a team to bring this to life, right? Yeah. And we're talking about a sales team here, if I'm not mistaken.
So if we talk about the full commercial ecosystem, yes, it's sales, it's marketing, it's support. Okay. It's whoever delivers down the line. Okay. Yeah.
So we're talking about let's focus on the sales team here. So and just before that, let's define is there clear borders between what marketing does, between what sales does, between what partnerships do? Or is that blurry in some cases?
No, it can be very blurry, and it changes from business to business. I think the most important part is that we are very clear internally on what are the definitions and the roles between each team. Yes. So literally, so that everybody in the commercial ecosystem understands what can I expect from the person before me, and what will the person after me expect from me. Yes. So roles and responsibilities, basically, right? Right.
And you, as a VP commercial right now at Upry, you are overseeing sales, go-to-market. Marketing, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, true. And so it all falls sort of under your sort of one umbrella. And do you feel like there's any best practices in terms of sort of drawing those borders or drawing those lines, or how do you approach that? You still have separate teams?
So I still have separate teams. Yes. I have marketing as one, sales as the other one. Yes. I've tried some of all of the more fancy abbreviations with calling marketing growth and giving them a broader license to play in the funnel. And some might make that work. I wasn't able to. I kind of like some of the classic definitions because, no matter how smart people are, everybody is better if they have a well-defined arena to play within. Yes. That goes for a company strategy, that goes for your go-to-market, the limits, that goes for what do you need to achieve this quarter, and goes for every given person. Like, if you succeed within this given arena, right, you are a success. Right. Now go do the most you possibly can. Right. And then just think, this is marketing and this is sales. That works quite well. Mm-hmm. We can do it in new ways and fancy ways. We can inject AI all over the place. Right. But end of the day, it's sales and it's marketing. Right. Yeah.
So roles really is the right way to go here. Like, define roles clearly, make sure everyone exactly understands what their job is, exactly what they're being measured on. Yeah. And so that's where the borders come from. That's where
really
the lines come from.
Knows what does good look like.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So if I'm a good leader, and I hope my team can recognize this when they hear this, that if they wake up in the morning and know what good looks like if Anders sees this, I did well. Right. If that will give them a sense of accomplishment, hopefully every single day when they go home, and that will make them a better person and a better professional, right? And that should be my job as a leader.
Right. Yes. I mean, it sounds like Sounds like what I would like to hear, for example, from my leader, and it's also what I do sometimes. Let's focus here on the sales team part of everything. Like you are doing at Upry, what you're doing right now is you do a lot of enterprise deals, right? And so enterprise deals, what they require is sort of this very person-led approach to guiding a customer from, identifying an opportunity to guiding them through the sales process and eventually onboarding them and growing that account. So how do you build a good sales team for specifically for what you're doing right now, which is a lot of enterprise customers, I guess, enterprise deals? Yeah. How do you build a good sales team for that? And also what goes into a life cycle of a sales team? Let's maybe start there.
Yeah, let's dive into sales. That's really where a lot of my passion is, right? And that's also what I know that, probably many of your listeners will just want to, I just want to sell more. Right. You can call it go to market, call it whatever you want. I just want to sell more. So let's focus on that part.
Yeah.
I think maybe let's go through the full cycle of running a sales team, basically from how do you hire? Yeah. How do you onboard? Yeah. How do you do like performance management and make sure that they thrive? And that should be the longest duration of this life cycle. Maybe we should even end off on the firing part, because that is part of also running a sales team. Yeah. So you better be good at that as well.
Right. Yeah. So what you're mentioning here is kind of 4 steps in this process. We've got hiring, we've got onboarding, we've got productivity, and potentially firing. Yeah. That's 4 steps. Yeah. All right. So let's start with hiring. Yeah. How do you hire a good salesperson?
You set up a process.
Okay.
Right? So that you hire in the same way every single time. Yeah. And that would start for us. That's like put up the job post. Then we know, okay, within 2-3 weeks, we can start doing screening calls. We normally do 15 minutes. Yeah. Because we just want to give people a chance to make their resume come to life. That's basically it. Yeah. And then we can screen a larger amount of people than if we set aside an hour for the first interview. Okay. This will be the hiring manager doing that.
Yes.
Step 1.
Yeah.
Step 2, 45 to 60 minute interview, hiring manager +1.
Okay.
Then we usually start injecting some tests. Yeah. Maybe a case. Yeah. So like a 2-fold thing. We want to see some personality and cognitive on test. Okay. Cognitive is a really good leading indicator of future success. Yeah. When you know what to look for, right? Yeah. Personality, like is this somebody who will match the team? Yes. And then something on a relevant case to make them see, do they, based off of the feedback we've given and the chemistry we should have at the moment, can they inject some relevance into how they would approach things, right? Okay. What is their way of thinking? Yeah. And then we're usually leaning towards a final interview. So there's really 3 steps plus the test and cases in between.
Okay, gotcha. So you're focusing, like, seems like you have the process like really worked out here. Yeah. The process in itself, I guess, if you were to apply it to different companies, they would probably end up hiring different people, right? What, in your opinion, makes a good salesperson? Like, what are you looking for in that person? Is it experience? Is it their like natural sort of charisma, since they're being salespeople? Yeah. What is it actually?
So I always want to see 3 things. I want to see curiosity. So somebody that wants to like keep learning and just is really curious by nature. Yes. I would like to see as high cognitive ability as possible, because that's an indicator of can you apply the knowledge that you will need. Yes. That's obviously a little bit depending on industry. You don't maybe need as high cognitive abilities in a sales team that sells a rather basic MarTech tool as you need if you're in life science or IoT, Internet of Things, as I was previously. Right. And then I want to see that they're hungry. Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
And that's super important, I guess.
Yeah, that's really it. Because if they want to get up in the morning and improve themselves, they're curious about everything around them, people, processes, market, product, all of these things are going to be fine. And the cognitive is, do they have the ability to soak up this knowledge and keep leveling up as a person, right?
How do you identify that in a person? Do you just see it?
That's a little bit part of the hiring process. You need to develop that skill. You can set up some fixed questions that you ask everybody. You give a rating, and then over time, then you can look at your high performances and seeing how did we rate them during the interview process. Yes. And you will basically institutionalize that knowledge as a company. Yes. So you get better at hiring, right? You can basically create cases on the best hires you ever did. Right. Like what did we see during the interview phase? Right. Then I want to search for something else, like what have they done previously? Yeah. I like to find profiles that have either done pro sports. Yes. They don't have to be a previous Olympian. Yeah. But that they trained like meticulously and systematically towards a goal. Okay. Usually you see that in sports.
Does it matter if it was a team sport or not?
Not in my experience, actually. Okay. I've seen both succeed. Yeah. I've seen synchronized swimmers doing amazing and completely individuals like tennis court, BMX, anything like that, right?
Okay.
So just the notion that you're used to understanding that input equals output.
Yes.
You're not going to be a glorious athlete if you don't put in the sweat.
Right.
That's the same in sales.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's one option.
Yeah.
The other one is, do you have really strong social capabilities?
Right.
So looking at hotels, restaurants, the whole service industry, some might be really good at catering to and talking to people.
Yes.
And uncovering needs and creating a conversation. And if they then have the same basic traits, curiosity, cognitive, and hungry, this can become really interesting.
Okay. Okay.
And then the obvious question is, where does experience play in?
Right.
That is relative to position, I would say.
Yes.
But it's the other things I would look at first.
Okay.
Like hands down, the best hires I've ever done, are the best salespeople I've ever had.
Yes.
Are the people that I've built up myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was told from smart people when I started, and that's what I've come to learn. Yeah.
Okay. So something here sort of is going into a little bit of the next step here on onboarding, right? So when you build up a salesperson, when you talk about building up a salesperson, I guess what goes into that is the way you onboard them and then the way you manage their productivity as they're working.
Yeah.
And also leveling up, right, in the organization.
Yeah.
How do you approach that part?
Yeah, so onboarding, let's just separate things. It's not about the team breakfast in the first week and how do you lock yourself into the office. That's just hygiene, right?
Yes.
Onboarding is, what does goals, input, output look like for the first week, first month, first quarter, maybe even first year. Coming back to what does good look like.
Yeah.
So a salesperson coming in should know what does good look like. What's the expectations for me?
Right.
Right. And we should be able to, as revenue leaders, to break that down, or founders for that matter. What does good look like? Mm. Like if we can't define that, things point at as us, it's like you should expect this to go wrong.
Right.
And we can say what are leading indicators of what you want to see.
Yeah.
So if you're selling to the SMB segment, you have short sales cycles, 30 to 60 days. You can see pretty fast, are they ramping a pipeline?
Right.
Are they starting to have interesting conversations and they will actually close customers within their first 3 months, right? Mm-hmm. Trial period if we're in the Nordics, Enterprise a little bit different. Now we have 12, 18 month sales cycles, so we need to look more at leading indicators.
Yes.
Are you putting in your input?
Yes.
Like are you putting in the calls you need, the emails? Are you attending the meetings? Are you building up the pipeline?
Right.
And what does good look like in terms of building up pipeline?
Yeah. What does good look like when you build up a pipeline?
It depends. You got to count backwards. Okay. So what does your fully ramped AE in enterprise? Yeah. What is their goal? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And what is so let's say they got to close 10 million a year.
Yeah.
10 million Danish kroner a year, right? So 1.5 million euros, something like that.
Yes.
Okay. Let's say you have a 25% close won rate. You got to multiply that by 4.
Okay.
So when you're up and running, if it's 10 million, you got to have 40 in your pipeline at any given time.
Yes.
Okay. How fast can you ramp towards that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then break that down and saying how much pipeline would you like to see built in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter?
Yes.
How would you like to see deals progressing throughout your sales stages? So in your funnel.
Okay. Okay, cool. So you basically make it very clear in terms of performance and sort of quantitative approach on where they need to be. What do you do when sort of you're seeing that they're lagging behind on some point? Like how do you approach that?
Gotta let them know.
You gotta let them know?
Gotta let them know.
Yeah.
Create a healthy feedback structure. So one of the things I like to do, and that was the first thing I told my team in Upry, I like to have as many conversations as I can by the desk.
Right.
Or in the open.
Yeah.
Because when we have interesting conversations, anyone that wants to can listen in.
Okay.
If we go into a meeting room, that knowledge is gone.
Okay.
Just between you and me, right?
Okay. Are people not worried about like privacy or like stuff like that?
I think I came into a culture where this was not uncommon.
Right.
But two, as a leader, that's for you to set that.
Right.
Maybe it's not there now, but then build that trust in your team where you can have feedback, or just candid conversations out in the open.
Yeah.
I'm very much a believer that if you are to give tough feedback, maybe we'll come back to that under the fine part.
Okay.
That should happen behind the door.
Yeah.
But anything else can and should happen out in the open.
Okay.
And what happens quite frequently about is that these conversations, they open up. Like then somebody just listens in a little bit like, hey, that sounds like a deal I'm working on. and suddenly we're 3-4 people jamming on how we can push stuff forward in our pipeline,
right?
Based off a question that came from somebody that could have put me into a meeting room, right?
I mean, it sounds like it's something that should work, and apparently it does.
I like that. I think there's some great energy in it. I also appreciate having meetings, virtual meetings at our desk. So for anything inside sales, I would say build a culture where you have the meetings at your desk and don't go and book meeting rooms or the little call cells, right?
Right.
Because you can listen in, you can feedback each other, you can learn from each other. And by the way, the energy in the room where you can hear stuff is happening, we're talking to customers, like we're building stuff. Yeah. That is amazing.
Right. It's actually kind of cool. Like it reminds me of the scene from The Wolf of Wall Street. Remember when like Jordan Belfort walks into this like salespeople office and then he just starts selling and everyone can hear him, and then they just like gather around him and then he closes the biggest deal that he's ever done or like that anyone in that organization ever has. And I think people just were amazed by that, and it's kind of like what you sound.
That's one of the least quoted, I think, scenes, but one of the less obscure, but actually one that's super relevant for this. Yeah, that's exactly what should be going on, right?
Right.
Learn from the best, right?
Gotcha. So you mentioned something about like being on point with the target. Let's say 10 million Danish kroner per year, right? That's what they need to close.
Yeah.
How do you set that target? How does that work? How do you forecast? How do you set a good target?
Yeah. So there's some easy math you can lean up against. We want to be around an X3 to X4 on the AE's total cost per year. So the OTE, the on-target earnings, that would be your base salary plus your bonus. That would be your OTE.
Right.
And then you want to be at X3, X4 in terms of what should they produce in terms of their quota on a year. So they earn their money back 3 to 4 times.
Okay. So
if you're above that, you're kind of industry best.
Right.
If you're below that, probably your metrics won't quite work out.
Okay. So it kind of matters basically on so my target will be dependent on my total compensation. Is that it?
Yeah. And then that's relative to your seniority, right?
Right.
So this also gives a really interesting notion for the AE individually. Like instead of saying, hey, I want to be senior AE because it sounds cool.
Yes.
Like, hey, I can move you to senior AE, but your expectations will go up. Your base salary will go up, but your quota will go up accordingly.
Right.
So now we suddenly, instead of just having a push for a nice title and a higher base salary, we start having the notion of you starting to own a number around yourself. Like, hey, what does it take to succeed, right?
Right.
And then it's my role as a leader to make you grow into that specific role and towards the next one, obviously as fast as possible for you at your any given stage, relative stage.
So that people also very clearly understand that if they're not ready to hit that quota, they're also not ready to perform on that level and get that sort of compensation, right?
Yeah.
So it's very clear for everyone on where you are and how ready are you to take on the next step.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
When it comes to the management part, how do you sort of break the year down into quarters and sales quotas? Let's talk about this part.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a favorite of mine, right?
Right.
We had a little bit of discussion behind the scenes on the notion of auctioning numbers, so let's get into that. But like how I like to see it is kind of like how do you start? How do you eat an elephant? Like you take it one bite at a time, right?
Right.
So take your annual target. I like to break that just down into quarters.
Yes.
And then into teams. I have 2 teams. I have a scale team doing SMB, and then enterprise, like you said, that's starting to take up more of a sizable chunk of the business, right? So they each get their chunk per quarter, and then I can slice that down per each individual AE. That's my top down.
Yes.
Now for the management part, I like to do my bottoms up and saying, okay, based off of you as an AE,
yes,
what's your quota for the quarter?
Yes.
And then we have a conversation at the first week of the quarter and the middle week of the quarter and ongoing. So every 6 weeks, essentially, we have a check-in that the A will own towards me on how are you doing on your number.
Yes.
What's your plan? Basically for the full quarter ahead on a running basis, right? But very much looking on obviously quarter by quarter, but so how's my quarter going to go? And then a check-in.
Yes.
But during the midway check-in, you got to be looking at your next quarter as well, right?
Right.
So this is where we build a habit of doing pipeline management.
Yes.
Then deal management is the subset underneath on the individual deals. That's something we can take a little bit more at the desks in some weekly team meetings, stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
But then what I want to do is from the bottom up, make them own their number.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear, like, what does good look like?
Mm-hmm.
And in sales, we have the benefit of good being a number.
Yeah.
So we put a number, and then there's a 360-degree multitude of things the individual needs to exceed with to own that number successfully. To be the best they can be as a person and as a professional, right?
Okay.
That would be what's your product knowledge like?
Right.
How good are you at the sales process? How good are you in sales process, meaning the first meeting, the discovery meeting, the follow-ups.
Right.
So both how good are you in the meetings, but also how good are you between the meetings.
Right.
A lot of sales magic happens between the meetings and not in the meetings. Like following up is a state-of-the-art like magic trick that's vastly underestimated. So do proper work between the meetings.
Okay.
Send PDFs that can work for you in the organizations.
Okay.
These types of things, right?
Yes.
How good are you at that? Are you looking up the proper sparring from the people next to you, from me as your manager or whoever it might be?
Yes.
Are you bringing in the right people to your deals, being some domain experts from, in our case, a quality team, because it's quality we're selling for the life science industry, end of day, or whoever it might be.
Right.
So that's the sparring that I, as a leader, should be able to give the individual. Like, what does your 360 look like? Are you like pulling the right levers to make the most of yourself?
Right.
And then we can start the auction and saying, okay, so your target might be, let's say for a scale A, it might be $1 million for the quarter.
Right.
But that's the quota, and we said that we want you to attain that. We want to push above the industry 80-85% quota attainment. Okay. We would like everybody to hit their quota, because then they're in the kicker territory when they get some extra percent from what they close.
Right.
And then we have a sales target on top. So the sales target is what they control. That's their guidance to me, where they auction how high can I go.
Okay.
Like they need to have a proper substantiation of that. It shouldn't be like a mirage kind of hallucinatory thing.
Okay.
And then we build that up to set the guidance.
Okay.
And then they might say, I have some blanks, but I think I can be pushing 1/4 this quarter. Okay. If I get some feedback on so, or if I get somebody leans in on deal A, B, and C, and it's like, okay, let's see if we can make you realize 1.4 in this quarter. Okay. And then I'll make sure to rally the resources needed to make that individual succeed on their plan.
Okay, and that would be, for example, SDR generating more inbound leads.
That would be a classic one. Hey, I need more opportunities. Right. Sure. Yeah, you need better leads and more leads. Right. All AEs needs better leads and more leads. Right. so that's a classic, right? But it's also like, how do you work with your leads? Right. You know, is your follow-up as strong as it could be? Like these types of things. So we go through that, right?
Okay, so the auction part would be basically me as an account executive saying, hey, I want to do more than what was initially forecasted for me this year.
Yeah.
And then if some, or basically then it's up to you as a sales leader or a sales manager, or whoever that is, to then say, okay, you get the extra resources because I think you're going to be able to do it. You're going to be able to pull it off, and you're going out of your comfort zone to raise your target. So you get more resources.
Yeah, and now let's talk about it as there's an infinite and not a finite amount of resources. Right. Because if all my A's are pushing for 40% over the target, I'm going to make sure we have 40% extra resources at hand, because that's what I want to deliver, right?
I see.
So that's my role.
Yeah.
But this way around, I get now a yearly target distributed into everybody in my sales team.
Yes.
Absolutely owns a number for the quarter.
Yes.
So my single point of failure is really distributed out to a multitude of, not points of failure, but people owning quarter by quarter what's going to happen, right?
Right.
And this way around, I also get a bottoms-up forecast, a great indication of what does the quarter really look like. Because one is when we do finance top-down, this is what we got to do.
Yes.
The other one is, what do we have pipeline for? What do we have opportunities for? You know, where do I have my sales team, right? There's highs and lows for any person and for any team, right?
Right.
And this gives me a really good indication, 6 weeks as a fixed cadence, like what's going on in my team, right?
Right. Exciting. It's a very interesting process of how you do it. How did you think of this? Is this something that you sort of came up with now at Upry, or was this sort of a culmination of experience by running commercial operations across, these multiple different industries that you've been a part of in the past?
I think it comes from a multitude of things, but mainly from the part that management style-wise, I'm not one to want to pre-book one-on-ones, weekly or daily check-ins or anything like that. I think it just blocks up too many calendars.
Right.
And we need to have time to be customer facing, right?
Yes.
I'm more one for being, hey, on the other hand, my calendar is open. So you can come address me at the desk, in Slack, whatever you might be, and I'll be available right when you need me.
Right.
But then on the other hand, I need to make it very clear what's the arena you should play in and what does good look like.
Right.
And then what's the right cadence for that? And then I kind of came up with this notion of saying, okay, let's do these 6-week check-ins.
Yes.
And I want you to own the number.
Okay.
Like if I can build you up to own your own number,
yeah,
then over time you're gonna be a force of nature.
Right.
And it's gonna be a lot easier and more fun for me being your leader.
Right.
Because we're gonna have some way more interesting discussions than just me looking down your numbers and saying, yeah, your activities are too low.
Right. Right.
Obviously, if your activities are too low, you're not going to hit your number.
Right.
So I would rather talk about the number you want to hit this quarter and next quarter and how that lines you up for a journey you want to have.
Right.
And then make you realize what do you need to input to get to that.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. But do you think this is something that would apply across, other industries besides software and hardware companies?
Yeah, I think people are smart.
Yeah.
Like there's smart people all over the place, right?
Right.
So they want to take responsibility. You just need to set them up in the right way to do that. And I don't think that must be industry agnostic.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking from like, if you were to look back on your experience on, running commercial organizations, running commercial efforts across all of these different industries that you've been, a part of in the past, is this like what are some of the things that you think would apply across all of those when it comes to go to market strategies, when it comes to commercial efforts? Was there anything that you saw was like that's exactly the same everywhere I go, every one of these industries that I go to, or is there even such a thing that applies everywhere?
I would love to say that there's like one thing. I don't think there is.
Okay.
I think there's a tendency to make strategy and go to marketplace overly complex.
Right.
So I really want to speak for simplicity.
Okay.
So I would rather have something that's overly simple, but that everybody can remember, talk into and execute into.
Okay.
Because then at least I know we're executing into the same direction.
Right.
Then I can add a little bit more flavor and granularity as we go. But I would rather have something that's so simple that everybody can remember it, understand it, and execute into it.
Right.
That's something that looks really fancy on 15 slides.
So basically, it's a problem that applied everywhere, that everyone shares, no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, I think
the problem is complexity.
I guess you guys recognize, everybody listening would recognize that, that often you end up to sound smart or to encompass everything. You get such a level of complexity in that you can't even remember yourself what you're actually about to present for your team or your board or whatever, right?
Right.
So I would rather boil that down into something incredibly simple. Like at the moment, we have a 2x2. That's our GTM strategy for Upry. So it's 4 boxes.
Yeah.
And I know everybody in my team understands that. Like, heck, we're even getting the engineers to remember what the go-to-market is about because it's a 2x2.
Right.
Right? There's a shit ton of details going on underneath each of these 4 boxes, right?
Yeah.
But that's for me as somebody else to grasp. But if I can just wake up in the morning and know, I could say by name who's owning the upper left box, right?
Yeah.
And they know that as well.
Yeah.
We're in a pretty good state.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So as you said, so basically, what was sort of the one thing that were these different things that you learned in these different industries that you worked in, something that you carry through still today?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a multitude of things I've brought forward.
Right.
I've done quite different things. So I was in the Army, the Royal Danish Lifeguards.
Right.
Both as a private, also as a spokesman for 3,000 privates when I was 18. Like way in over my head, but super interesting. Like a saying from the lifeguards is 1 is none, 2 is 1.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the notion of when you go into war.
Yes.
You want to have somebody next to you at any given time, your buddy, right?
I would.
Now I'm pulling it into hiring.
Right.
And I would really advise for that for sales hiring. 1 is none, 2 is 1.
Yeah.
So if you want to hire BDR and AE, whatever you're hiring, like go for 2.
Right.
You're gonna make a better experience for them when they go into the onboarding we talked about.
Yeah.
They're gonna have somebody to stand shoulder to shoulder with.
Yes.
They'll be good at different things, so probably they can build each other up.
Yeah.
They're gonna have a better onboarding process, and most importantly, you as a leader will have a point of reference. Like, what does good look like? Now, you set the good onboarding expectations from what we discussed about what does good look like.
Yes.
But are they playing into that? Well, they're probably playing into it differently, but now you can actually compare because you hired 2.
Right.
So 1 is none, 2 is 1. That's great for hiring. Worst case, they both work out, but they're in sales, so they will have a 3 to 4 times payback, so it's not really a problem.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's hire in pairs.
And then I think there's an interesting one to pull forward from Bang & Olufsen.
Yeah.
I had a great manager in there who told me, If you want to have a saying, own a number.
Okay.
And like I talked a lot about owning a number today, so that's something I'm really passing forward. But it's like, hey, if you want to own a number, people will listen, and the bigger numbers you own and deliver on, the more saying you have.
Okay.
So that also goes for the usual, sales and marketing, are they friends or not friends? Marketing, just own a number, and that number should be on revenue.
Right.
Everything else is leading indicators in terms of MQLs or lead scores or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
You can look at pipeline generated. I would even call that a leading indicator, but just own a number.
Yeah.
Own it alongside sales, right? Otherwise, sales is there all alone.
Yeah.
So it goes for teams as well as individuals. Just go in and own a number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? You got anything else?
So there's a good saying, I think, for anybody going the VC route.
Mm-hmm.
How do you count to 100?
Okay.
So when you're sitting in front of a VC, just know that all you really got to do is learn how to count to 100, meaning 100 million ARR. Okay. If you get to that state, you're a fund returner, right?
Okay.
So that's all they're really looking for. When they look at your case, if you can make a clear route up to 100 and make them confident in that case, you're not going to get the investment.
Okay. So what you're saying is that if you want to go down the VC route, if you want to get that check, you better have a very clear path of how you're going to get to 100 million. Was that dollars? USD?
Dollars, USD, or euros, doesn't matter.
Okay.
That the investors won't care if it's one or the other currency. They're so close.
Right.
And clear path is relative. Are you on pre-seed? You can't draw a clear path to 100.
Yeah.
But you should be able to say what are the major motions that you think will be in your favor that will take you to and through 100 million ARR euros.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow, those are some cool learnings.
Maybe shooting one more in there.
Two
words they got to remember.
All right.
Repeatable and scalable.
Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, that means you can set up a great salesperson, or you can be an amazing selling founder yourself.
Okay.
But that can't be repeated or scaled. That's one person.
Yeah.
So you got to have repeatability and scalability in the motions you want to scale on. From that point on, it's just a payback thing. Like how long time before you have your money and you can redeploy it, and how much cash you have at hand to push in.
Okay.
So you want to find repeatable and scalable motions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one. I'll remember that one. All right, Anders, we're nearing the end of the episode here. So what I want to do next is just do a quick firing round of hot questions I'm going to ask you. Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And all you do, you answer yes or no, or just like a very short answer.
Okay.
Ready?
I'm up for it.
All right, let's go. Should AEs, account executives, be generating their own pipeline?
No.
Okay. Is being a good salesperson something you have to be born with?
No.
Would you rather coach one underperformer or hire a new account executive?
Ooh, tough one. We didn't cover firing, so I'm gonna say I would coach the underperformer. They need coaching before they need firing.
Okay.
Or somebody new.
Okay. Should marketing own part of the revenue target?
Yes.
Are quarterly business reviews, QBRs, overrated?
No, not at all.
And last one, have you ever completely changed your mind about something in sales?
Absolutely.
What was that?
A ton of things.
Okay. Pick one. Give us one.
Outbound was dead. Now it's not dead. Outbound keeps working.
Okay.
Marketing shouldn't own a target. Now they should own a target. You live and you learn. It's major things and it's small things. I think I change my mind daily on smaller things, and then I try to stay true to the strategy we set for a little bit of a longer run. We should be able to change our minds all the time.
So when it comes to the last step in this sales rep's life cycle, the exiting and / firing part.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? How do you know when it's time to let someone go?
So I think it's a little bit of an untouched topic, really, in leadership in general, but sales leadership specifically. So I think it's great we're touching upon this.
Yeah.
The short version is, I think if you're in doubt, you're not in doubt.
Okay.
Then you need to act. But at that point, everything points at you as a leader as you fail, because you need to act sooner than that. Okay. You can always expect that there's a Grand Canyon of misalignment between you as a leader and the individual that you're not satisfied with. Mm-hmm. So your biggest responsibility is to bridge that gap. Now let's take that in steps. That happens by having a continuous cycle of feedback, right? Both on the good stuff, but also the hard stuff. Good stuff, pull it out in public. Hard stuff, behind the door, behind the closed door.
Yes.
But take that with the little things. If there's something you really don't like in how a deal is being presented, or how somebody acted in a very wrong way in front of a colleague or something like that, make sure to act immediately. Don't pile those things up, right? That's the running feedback.
Okay. Then that's the hard part. That's the hard part of it?
I think all parts of this is hard, to be honest, but we as leaders need to pack that in. That's part of the job description we sign up for, right? Founders, leaders, whatever, that's what we got to do.
Yeah.
That's the running feedback. Take that up a notch. That's the sessions where we now sit down, book a time slot and saying something is not in line.
Okay.
Usually we will need to follow up with a written follow-up, so we have that stamp in time.
Okay.
That's one, respect for the person we're sitting in front, so they know the level of seriousness we're operating with. Yeah. And two, it's just part of how firing is being done properly, at least in Danish terms, right? That you need a couple of written warnings.
Yes.
And I'm saying now a couple because you will actually usually normally need two that are written, formal warnings that something is not in place.
Yes.
So we have level 1, running feedback, level 2, written warnings.
Yes.
You can go to a level 3 with a PIP, personal improvement plan.
Yes.
It's rare I see those working out because it's more like the first step to firing,
right?
And somebody skips step 1 and 2, and then that's like the soft, easy win because now they push it on the sales rep instead of taking it in as a leader.
Right.
So if you do a PIP, it has to be a plan where you actually want them to succeed.
Gotcha.
And then comes the firing part.
Right.
And at this moment in time, you can't wait around.
Yes.
It's on you as a leader to act fast.
Yeah.
Hence the notion of if you're in doubt, you're not in doubt.
Okay.
But you need to take those steps.
Okay.
And if anyone is surprised about a person leaving, you failed as a leader.
Right.
If no one is surprised, they won't tell you.
Right.
But you did good as a leader.
Okay.
So,
because that would be my next question is like, how do you know if it was the performer or if you're doing something wrong as a leader? I guess you would know because they probably wouldn't be the only person leaving. Or
you always have some benchmarks in the other sales reps, right? But normally when you do fire somebody, it's very rare you will come and get a pat on the back from anyone in the team and saying, well done.
Right.
But if it's quiet and things settle and smiles go up, you did the right thing. Right. And that's part of your job description. So you got to do it.
Okay. So to sum it up, basically, you would have those conversations, you would have the difficult conversations, and then it's at a certain point you would just naturally figure out that you can't take it any further than there.
And the key thing here is, as a leader, you want to be predictable.
Right.
You want your team to know exactly what does good look like and when is it not good. And they should know that from you, this will be highlighted if I'm not doing the right thing. You want to be incredibly predictable because that creates trust.
Gotcha. Understood. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening in. You're going to be able to find this episode on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, everywhere. Make sure to follow Upry on LinkedIn. Make sure to follow Anders on LinkedIn. And make sure to follow Quadrant Consulting on LinkedIn. As mentioned before, we're going to be attaching the commercial ecosystem model in the link so you can have a look at it. And also definitely go check out Anders because he has a lot of great content outputting at all times.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or requests, you can always contact us at info@quadrant.dk. If you want to know more about Quadrant Consulting, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, or go to our website quadrant.dk.